and I had the riff already, so I was like, this is what I should do with this riff, you know, it's kind of a more upbeat song. And so I took that riff and I thought, man, what would, like, if you were at home tonight, you could be out, like, drinking with buddies, what would you be doing, you know? And I thought, hell, we'd be out playing in the mud in the trucks or something, you know? So that's kind of where the idea for the Good Times video came from. We'd load up gear and we'd go play those on a Tuesday or Wednesday or a Thursday night, whatever night we could, and be back home in time to go to school in the morning. And we go down and to Champaign and we play with Frankie Ballard, and we open up for him, and we get done playing the show, and I remember the promoter came up to me and he said, man, he goes, you guys sound better than the last time I heard you. He goes, you just keep getting tighter and tighter. And I said, well, that's good, because this was our first show with this guitar player. Kenny's going to have all the dirt on all of us, because he's going to have all the outtakes. Be like, hey, man.
I've got that itch to do something wild and crazy tonight. Headed down that road, and all I need is you here by my side. I pull into the drive to pick you up, hop on up in the cab of my truck. We'll be gone until the sun comes up. We're out for a good time tonight, way out here. We got us a bonfire, some moonshine, and ice cold beer. The song's on the radio, don't you know, and that sky's so clear. So let's hop on up in the bed of my truck, hold you close till the sun comes up. The radio playing all damn night. We're out for a good time. We're out for a good time.
So, yeah, so how I got started, I guess, would have been, I was about probably 5 years old, and I wanted a drum set for Christmas, and my mom got me it was a real drum set at the time, and it came with the paper heads and stuff on it, you know, and so I started on that, and then when I broke the heads, I needed real drums, so it kind of started and progressed from there. Back in high school, I was playing the drums, and we found a guitar player. Kind of started a little basement band, really. We would go over there every day after school and just kind of play around and mess with song ideas, and that's kind of where the first writing in a band came from for me. We would just sit down there and toss riffs around all day long, not even full songs, just riffs, and this is really cool, we should write off that, you know, and then somebody would come up with a drum beat, and you would take off and do that, and then pretty soon, you know, you had a few songs together, and next thing you know, people are coming over after school to watch you in the basement, and those were like some of the first cool days, you know, where your buddy's like, you gotta come over and check out this song that we wrote, and we don't even have lyrics to it yet, but it's really cool, you know, it's a really good song, and that's kind of where it all started. Eventually, we started meeting some other people. Josh Thompson was probably one of the first people. We played hockey back in the day, and so we would go into Stick Shack Sports, and Josh would be working, and I found out he was a guitar player, so we started talking music stuff and learned a lot from him, and started getting to know some people through him and playing some open mic nights, I guess they probably were back then. I don't know that they were really called open mic nights back then, but it was like, hey, such and such at this place is going to be having, like, you know, come down and play 5 songs type of deal. So we would load up gear and we'd go play those on a Tuesday or Wednesday or a Thursday night, whatever night we could, and be back home in time to go to school in the morning. And then, you know, after everybody graduated, we stuck around for a little bit. Before my guitar player went to college, we would go out and we'd do the same thing. You know, we would find the open mic nights where we could go and just get a few songs out there. And that's kind of my first experience anyway with writing with a group of people. I think we learned a lot and grew a lot in a really short amount of time in that band, probably. I went back to playing drums after that. Bounced in and out of several different bands. And then got hooked up with Sherry and Jerry Depew in a band called Second Nature with them. And kind of got back into the drumming. I'd been doing some fill-in drumming here and there. And it just so happened at that time, Shannon Wolf was a good friend of mine, and he was moving to Iowa. So I ended up buying the iconic shake drum set, the green one from back in the day. Still have it to this day. My boys play on it. I jam on it as much as I can anyway, right? And so I got back into just playing some drums with them. And we probably were together for 4 years, something like that. Played a lot of drums with them, played a lot of fun shows with them, made a lot of good relationships, and the acoustic thing kind of got going as we would take breaks, and rather than playing the jukebox or playing music, I'd pick up an acoustic guitar and I would start playing a cover of whatever song. People seemed to like it, so I started learning more and more songs on the acoustic. I'd always kind of messed around with the guitar from junior high or high school on, but never really sat down and learned a lot on it because I was a drummer. So, right, the guitar was just a kind of a secondary thing for me for a long time. And I started learning more and more songs, and we started playing on more and more breaks to the point where people seemed to really be catching on, and I thought, well, maybe this could go somewhere. So at that time, about the time I had my second kid, actually, I took a little break from playing out all weekend. I was tired of getting home at 3 and 4 in the morning and the stress of all that stuff. So I started sitting down with the acoustic guitar and really just writing a lot. And that's kind of where the songwriting part of it came in. I'd always listened to country music. My mom always had country music playing, and my dad listened to a lot of southern rock stuff, so that kind of music was always in my life. And just kind of picked up the guitar and strumming chords and writing riffs and putting things down. And I would write notes in notebooks where I didn't even have a melody for it yet, but I would just sit down and write, and then go back to it. And that's still kind of the way I do things now, is there's hundreds of unfinished songs, but I just kind of go back, and you get to a point, sometimes I feel like you get stuck on that song, and you're trying too hard, so you put it away for a while, and you just keep writing your ideas down, and sometimes eventually you end up going back to that song and finishing it and making something of it. At least that's a lot of how it works for me. I think everybody writes a little bit different, so that works for me. They just started writing more and more, and about 5 or 6 years ago, really decided I wanted to get back into it and pursue it again, and take it a little more serious this time around, I guess. And so I started putting a lot of emphasis on writing, your own original stuff. And over the last couple of years, I've got involved with some co-writes and writing with other people, and that's always fun too, because sometimes they have a different opinion or a different angle on something where you can go say, hey, there's my idea, and I'm really thinking this, and they go, no, I'm thinking this, and you go, wow, I've never thought of it like that. So then all of a sudden the whole song changes and becomes something maybe that you didn't even think about or somewhere it could go. So I like the songwriting process a lot. It's probably been one of my most favorite things of ever being involved in music as a whole, is just, it comes back to writing that song. It's just a really cool process that a lot of people don't ever experience, Songwriting process, a lot for me, I don't know. I think I probably write different than a lot of people, because a lot of people have, just lyrics and a melody right out of the gate. For me, a lot of the songwriting process stuff comes from, I'll think of something on the guitar. I'll come up with a lot of times I'll have the music before I ever have the melody or the words to it. So I will write the music first and then go, man, I got to put some really good words with that, you know. Sometimes, you know, it all comes together at once, but for me, a lot of times the music, like I'll have all kinds of riffs or song ideas that I put on my phone all over the place. And I always say, if I die and somebody finds my phone or listens to what I have on my phone, they're going to think I'm absolutely nuts, because it's a bunch of like, da 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 da, and I'm humming melodies, or I'm singing words, or I'm tapping out beats, and they're probably listening to it and go, I don't even know what this is. But there's about 300 of them on there that are not finished that I'll go back to, and I'll have a idea, and it'll just kind of stall, and then I'll go back to it later, and you're like, oh, I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Was before it was so simple. But a lot of my stuff is like that. I did a song with somebody that you actually did, Johnny Schultz, earlier, and he had sent me some ideas for a song a while back, and it was really cool. And he said, "Man, I got this idea for this song, but it's not something, that I would do, but I think something needs done with it, And so he sent me these words and kind of a melody line to go off of, and I kept listening to it, and it was one of those things where you kind of like just had to listen to it a bunch, and take it in. And we kind of talked back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And like, I've been listening to it. Like, I haven't really had much yet, but like, I'm just kind of stewing on it right now, And so one Friday morning, it's like I had the day off work. I went out, picked up a guitar, and it was like it just hit me that day. Like, we're gonna finish this song. We're gonna do this song, and so I just sat down and wrote it all out, and took what he had and sat down and really like looked at the lyrics and thought about it, and that one came out really cool. It's gonna be on the new album, so I'm really excited to see that one and see it come to life. We got a rough draft acoustic version of it right now, and I sent it to him, and he was really happy with it. And he said, a couple days later, he texted me back and said, "Man, I just keep listening to this song, and I can't get it out of my head." He said, "I just can't wait to hear a great version of it." So that'll be a good one. But that song, sometimes I remember having the conversation with him and saying, like, "I don't have anything yet for you, but like, give me some time, give me some creative time, because sometimes it doesn't just plop out on the table." And it was like that day was the day, and the songwriting stuff, I think a lot goes like that. Is if you try to force it, at least for me, I find if I try to force it, I end up with crap that I throw away anyway. So sometimes I just gotta set it off to the side and keep working on other things, and maybe come back to it when you're thinking of things differently or having a different day, and sometimes it just kind of finishes itself, and that's definitely what happened with that one. So you're playing, and that thing kicks on, you're like, I gotta keep going. So then I just lay down a really scratch vocal track of it, and I'm sitting in the chair like this, and I'm just holding my phone, and I'm just kind of like looking around, singing this. I'm like, this is a scratch track. I just gotta like get these words down so I can remember them. I got them written down on paper. Gotta get this melody down real quick and get all this stuff down, and then I go back and listen to it, and I'm like, this sounds terrible. But I'm like, it's just going to Johnny, so it won't matter. So I sent it to him, and he's like, "Man, that was so good." And I showed it to my son, both my sons, and I showed it to Allison, and they're like, "This is really good." Yeah, and my buddy Caleb listened to it, and then like, "Can you send that to me?" And I'm like, "No, because it's the worst thing ever. Like, it's the worst recording ever, in the shop." But that song definitely, when it goes in the studio, has to have that like organic, just stripped down like guy in a guitar, I think, feel, because with a little bit of that like white noise in the background, not too much, but certain things happen like that when you're writing songs, to where you didn't mean for them to happen, but they add that element to the song, and now you're like, well, when we go to the studio, I need this to sound like this, because this accident happened while I was doing the scratch track of it. And now all of a sudden, it's got to have this feeling to it. I think a lot of it, you have all this program stuff anymore. program drums and program this, and there's no flaw. So then everything is so perfect that when you go out and see a live show, I mean, it could be 99% perfect. There'll be flaws that you don't know that they happen during the show, but most people don't know. But yeah, I can't do the too perfect thing really, because for me that's not where the song starts at. For me, the song starts here and here, and I sit out wherever I'm at, whether it's in the house or in the shop or in the yard, out on the patio in the summertime, when bugs are chirping and the crops are all up around here, and all you hear is the noise of the bugs and the coyotes are howling, and you're out there with the guitar writing songs, and that's not perfect, and that first run of it's not perfect, and that usually that first run is what I'm going off of on my phone. You have an idea and you throw it down on your phone or your iPad or whatever you've got with you, and so that part of it's, you want the song to be good, but you don't want it to be perfect. The Matt Miller Band kind of started, I guess in probably about 2015-ish, 14, something like that. I honestly had like 3 songs, and I had got a hold of Mike Lane, which a lot of people know from back in the day. And Mike produced a lot of rock albums in the bands that I was in, several different ones. I was in a band with Mike called the Leader Dogs at one point. We did a few shows, did a lot of stuff in his studio when he had Noise Gate Studios in Pekin, Illinois. And I had multiple bands in that studio that did multiple projects there. And when the Matt Miller Band thing kind of started, I hit him up to produce another album, and at that time he was looking at moving to Florida, and was getting rid of the studio and things like that, wasn't going to have the space to do it. So he gave me a name of a guy named Colt Caparoon, which I had hit up. And Colt and him Colt was part owner in that studio for a while, and they had worked together for years. And Mike said, well, if there's anybody else, in the area that could produce, a great sounding product, Colt's your guy to talk to. And Colt was just starting to get his studio going in the old Murray building in Peoria. And things were just kind of getting started there. It was kind of a construction he was doing. He had a couple of rooms done, and he was still doing some stuff. So I got a hold of him and said, hey, I really got these about 4 or 5 songs that I've been writing, and I want to get them down. I said, I don't really know what I'll do with them, if I'll ever do anything with them. But at that time, my kids were pretty young, and I said, I want to have these songs, like a good quality product of these songs on, some sort of CD. Now it's all on, the computer, USB, whatever. But I said, I want to have some sort of record of this, And so he said, all right, and we started recording. And I remember going in, I played all the drum tracks on my first EP. A lot of people probably don't know that, but I did all the drum tracks, I wrote all the drum parts for it. And I remember going in on July 5th, and we were both, had 4th of July stuff going, the day before, and we come in and set up the drums, and that studio was on like the 3rd or 4th floor of that building. So, and you're in this little bitty service elevator, and I could only fit about half my drums and me in it to be able to push the buttons, And so I after 3 or 4 loads up, we get everything up and sound check, and we run through drum tracks. And I remember being super nervous because I hadn't played drums in years at this point, but I had my drum set up at the house, and I had, wrote all the drum parts and kind of learned the songs, so to speak, in my head. And so we went through and we nailed everything in I don't think I did anything more than 3 tracks. And he had enough good stuff that we could make it all work. And so he recorded that, and we started to gain a little momentum. And in the meantime, long story short, was his studio got moved from Peoria to Nashville because the city was taking over that building and this and that, and they were making it into apartments, and they basically kicked all the tenants out. And so Colt moved to Nashville. So right in the middle of the album, we literally moved studios from Peoria to Nashville. So we got the drums tracked, and we got a few vocals things done, and then we moved down to there.
and we finished the album down in Nashville. And when the album was finished, we had a lot of traction going on as far as just people interested in it, and we had shows lining up, and I needed a band, and I didn't have a band at this point. So I talked to Colt and said, hey, you were already playing the lead parts on the album, why don't you come play for the band? And he said, all right, I could do that. And so he was actually traveling up from Nashville for a while and playing shows. And then he was in another band with a couple other guys, and I had known a few of these guys from other bands around the area. So we recruited Dirk McCoy to play drums, and Dan Tremblay for the bass, and then Matt Momman, who was in my first band of Mismatch, he came on and played rhythm guitar in that band. And then we had Jeff Logston on the keyboards and the banjo, and Jeff did all the tracking stuff in the studio. And then we had Mr. Tim Har on the pedal steel, and Tim did the stuff on that first EB2, and they all agreed to kind of come be a part of the live band version of it. So here we are with a 7-piece band up there, and we start playing a couple shows, and I think it was maybe the first year or two we got a call to play for Trace Atkins on the Riverfront, and that was probably the biggest show that I've ever played. There was 5,000 or 6,000 people there that night, and we all went up and we had a really a good show. I remember that show was so hot. It was like in July, and it was for like the barbecue thing that they do down on the riverfront. And I remember having to have some other RVs and stuff brought in from friends, so we had somewhere to be air conditioned like during the day, because our sound check was at like 2 o'clock, and there was nowhere else to be like in the air conditioning or out of the sun, and we're like, we're gonna die out here. So we it ended up being a great night. It was a great show, but that was kind of the first go around of members, I guess, of the Matt Miller band. Yeah, so over the years, members changed. Cole started getting real busy with the producing stuff, and that was great for him, because that's ultimately what his long-term goal was to make his business a go. And so we started having some fill-in people here and there, and we were still playing big shows. And then we had another local guy, Mr. Damian Dickerson, come on and play. I remember the first show that we played with Damian, Colt couldn't make it up for some reason, and I remember hitting up Josh Thompson. I was like, dude, we just got this offer to play with Frankie Ballard in Champaign at the City Center. I said, I need a fill-in guitar player like yesterday. And he says, man, I can't do it, but I know a guy that can. And so he hooked me up with Damien. And, God bless Damien, because he learned all this stuff in like 3 days. We threw a bunch of stuff at him in like 3 days. And he learned it all to a T. And we go down to Champaign, and we play with Frankie Ballard. And we open up for him. And we get done playing the show, and I remember the promoter came up to me and he said, man, he goes, you guys sound better than the last time I heard you. He goes, you just keep getting tighter and tighter. And I said, well, that's good, because this was our first show with this guitar player. And I remember him laughing, and then he said, I'm really glad you didn't tell me that before the show. But Damien just killed it that night. And so Damien came on and played with us for probably a year and a half. And then he went on and played with Burden of the Sky and went on tour with those guys. And so when Damien left, we were looking for another guitar player. And my current guitar player now, Evan, he showed up kind of out of the blue. I went out to eat pizza one night with my youngest son and 2Ps in Pekin, and these guys started carrying some music stuff in. And it was just a guy and an acoustic guitar and another guy with a cajon. I'm like, hey, they're gonna have an acoustic band tonight. We just stick around and watch these guys. And so they start setting up and they start playing, and this guy's singing and playing guitar, and both are phenomenal. I mean, better singer than I am and way better guitar player than I am.
and the guy on the cajon just, as a drummer, when that guy's got the beat and he's in the rhythm, you know it, and you're like, man, this guy is good, And so Mr. Brock Olsey was his name, and so those guys were sitting. So when they took a break, I said, you play out much around here? I've never seen you around here. And he said, oh no, we just kind of do this for fun. And I said, well, you ought to come out sometime and check out a show. We're looking for a guitar player. And he came out and played a couple shows, and the rest is kind of history. He's been around for a couple years now, and he's a great guy. I think he's probably one of the better elements. He's got a real cool southern rock side to him, which is a lot of where my stuff stems from. My dad's favorite band was Skinner, so I remember listening to all that and like 38 Special and that stuff growing up, and I loved that side of the rock and roll stuff. Was one of my favorite. Skinner is still one of my favorite bands to this day, and I like a lot of their B-side stuff. The stuff that's not on the radio or people that don't know. People don't know. So he definitely brings that more southern rock element to the band, which I really, really like. I think it's kind of showcased on the new album. We'll have a new album coming out on September 11th of this year, so there's going to be a lot of new songs, a lot of different stuff than what was from the first EP, and it's going to be a good album. There's definitely more of a rock side, I think, a southern rock side to this album. It's got the country stuff, and it's got that southern rock stuff kind of mixed in there, so it's more of a Steel Woods, Whiskey Myers kind of stuff, music stuff like that. Some of the guitars are a little bit heavier, but still have that country twang to them, and still have the country storytelling aspect of the songs to them. A lot of stuff goes like that, so we're looking forward to it. It's gonna be a good one, I think. All right, the Good Times video. So how the Good Times video came about? Good Times was kind of the first single, I guess, off the EP, and so we thought we should probably have a video for it. And so I just kind of always had, like, when I wrote that song in a hotel room. That part, it started out right before I left for this trip for work. So, I did and I was like, all right, I got this riff. So I took my guitar with me, and we went into the hotel room, or I did, and I got there and I got all settled in for work. Me and this other guy I was working with, and we get all settled into the hotel room, and we go to work that day and we come back that night, and like it'd just been a really crappy day at work. We were working in this crap ass ethanol plant, and it was just a dirty, nasty job that day, and it's just one of those, like, man, God, if we could just go out and have some good times right now. And we're in this town that just really has nothing going on. There's just nothing. There's nothing to do at night. There's nowhere to go. There's, it's a Tuesday night or whatever it was, and I'm like, man, I wish we were just having some good times right now. Like, I just want to go out and have some good times. And there was nowhere to go, and I remember standing outside of the hotel, and we were just cracking a couple beers, and we had a little conversation, and he's like, all right, man, I'm going to bed. I'm like, yeah, me too. And I go back up, and I'm like, good times. I'm like, I got to write this. Like, so I sat down, and the lyrics came out really quick, probably within an hour, I would say, or less, And I had the riff already, so I was like, this is what I should do with this riff, it's kind of a more upbeat song. And so I took that riff, and I thought, man, if you were at home tonight, you could be out, like, drinking with buddies, what would you be doing, And I thought, hell, we'd be out playing in the mud in the trucks or something, So that's kind of where the idea for the Good Times video came from, was after I wrote that song, I thought, we got to shoot a video like what I would want to be doing when I wrote that song. That's what I would want to be doing. So I talked to another buddy that lived over by Manitou, and he used to have this mud pit that we all used to go to years ago. And I knew nothing had been done with it for a long time.
And I got a hold of him, and I said, hey, what do you think about shooting this music video out there? And my buddy Levi Barnes from over there said, I'd be all right with it, you know, as long as you guys pick up after yourselves and you know, everybody's cool, I would be all right with it. So we kind of went out and scoped it out and mowed a few little patches down and this and that. And Levi did a bunch of mowing for us around. And that day came, and it was like, I'm pretty sure it was the hottest day that year, if not like the second hottest, but I think like on record that year, it was the hottest day. We had multiple RVs out there. We brought in extra generators to keep air conditioners going, to keep everybody cool for the day that was on the, you know, the shooting, the filming crew, and just everybody in the band and the people that were in the video. We had to keep from the makeup melting off everybody's faces. And of course, you know, the guys didn't have to worry about it, but there was a girl named Andrea in the video, and so she was kind of the main character girl in the video, and so we had to keep everything from melting off her face that day. So we would come out and we'd do some shots, and then we'd get everybody back into the RVs and touch up makeup and go to the next scene and do it like that. So we had a lot of people show up that day. We kind of opened it up to the public somewhat. We didn't make a big spectacle of it, but there was a lot of people that knew what was going on, and we told everybody, hey, bring your trucks, bring your four-wheelers, bring whatever you got. And we had GoPros out there that day, and waterproof lenses, and people standing in the mud pit, and all kinds of just stuff. Video footage, there's a ton of video footage from that day. There was a lot of good footage. Besides the blazing hot weather that day, we had a great time. I was out there, I think, from about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning to about 11 that night, and I was beat after that night. But it was a fun day. It was a fun video shoot, and I look forward to doing some more videos for this the next album. But we had a lot of good times that day, and no pun intended. But it was a fun shoot. It was a really fun shoot. Yeah, so my mom made this table. She made it for me one year at Christmas, and she found this old guitar case in an antique store. And my dad took these legs off an old, an old nightstand or table or something, and put them on there. And then my mom found this article with the Secrets of Songwriting, and so she saved this page out of an old music book, found this article, and then all these were out of the same book, and they were the pages were in such bad shape that, you know, none of them would hardly come out in a whole piece. So she took all the pieces and put them all on there and put like a clear coat shellac finish on it, and gave it to me one year for Christmas as it was my coffee table for a long time. So had notepads on it, different drinks on it, guitars on it, and wrote a lot of songs just off of things that were sitting on this table. It was a pretty inspirational piece, really, for a while. Still is, but it's definitely something that's really cool. Nobody else has one like it, so it's a one-of-a-kind piece, I guess you'd say. So, a lot of people ask how me and Allison met. If you don't know Allison, Miss Allison Lohman plays out with me on most acoustic shows, and she plays out in all our full band stuff, and she's the one that's singing all the beautiful harmonies that I can't sing and makes me sound good. So, a lot of people always ask us, you know, well, how did you guys meet? And the story goes that years and years before we were ever a thing, we kind of shared a banjo player and a steel player in Jeff Logston and Tim Harr. So they were playing with the Matt Miller Band, and they were playing with their band Spring Creek Station. And so Spring Creek Station had a gig, and it actually got rained out. And so
she was coming back through where I was playing that night in Green Valley, Illinois, and it was called the Fits In at that time. And I was playing over there an acoustic show, and she stopped in and she said, "Hey, my name's Allison Lohman, and I'm the singer for Spring Creek Station. You know, Jeff and Tim play for you." And I said, "Yeah, yeah." And I remember I was just about ready to take a break, so I took off my guitar and I handed it to her, and I said, "Here, play me something real quick. I need a beer." And I thought I would kind of test the waters and see, make her uncomfortable, because that's what musicians do to each other. You know, you show up to somebody else's show and they throw you a guitar or they throw you a set of drumsticks and they say, "Here, come play a song," and you're like, "I'm just here to hang out." And so she took it really well. She grabbed the guitar and she went up and played a song, and I remember hearing her sing with just a guitar, and that was the first time I'd ever heard her sing with just her and a guitar, just stripped down. And I thought, man, this, like, it just hit me, you know. Her voice hits you, and so a couple of years, 2-3 years went by from the time that we first met, and then we were, I was going through a divorce and stuff, and she had came out to a couple different shows and sang again, and I said, "Well, we should get together and sing something sometime. I think our voices would fit good together, you know." And I got a couple of ideas and on some songs, and I'd love to have some really great harmonies on. And so she said, "Yeah, we should do that." And we started hanging out and playing songs together, and then the next thing you know, here we are 3 years later, playing music together and writing stuff, and it she's been a saving grace to me for sure, and she's, you know, helped me out a lot on the songwriting stuff and just different things. Has really helped give that different perspective on, you know, well, what about this? So that it always helps to have that, like, second set of eyes looking in on something, because sometimes you get focused writing something or doing something one way, and you kind of like get tunnel vision, and then you get somebody from the outside saying, "Hey, what about this? What about a, you know, look at it like this." And so she's always my go-to on I'll bounce song ideas off her all the time and say, "What do you think about this?" or "What am I missing here?" You know. All right. So legends, man, there's so many. So I'm sure I'm gonna forget somebody. So if I forget you, I'm super sorry right now. Like the first legend that probably comes to mind for me was probably because it was one of the first ones I met was Josh Thompson. Like I said, I was probably 13 or 14, and he was probably 15 or 16 working at Stick Shack Sports, and we were playing hockey, and I found out he was a guitar player. He's always been one for sure from the beginning that's kind of encouraged me and always, you know, been there. And he's one of those guys where you don't talk to him maybe sometimes for a long time, but every time we pick up the phone or we talk, it's like, you know, like we just picked up where we left off kind of deal. So Josh for sure. Mike Lane helped me out a lot in the beginning. Like I said, he had the recording studio, and we played in multiple bands, and he actually recorded the first, like, real CD that I ever put out. Like, it was in an actual studio with the band Mismatch. So he was definitely one that was there from the beginning too. Shannon Wolf, I mentioned earlier. Shannon was always a huge inspiration to me on drumming. Just I could watch that guy drum for hours at a time and never get bored. So you had Shannon, and then I always looked up to you, man. There was always bands that you were playing in when I was, you know, young and upcoming drummer and playing drums, and I'd always heard about you and knew your band, so you were definitely one of them too. And then you throw Jeff Logston in there, and Jeff is Jeff. I wish I could have like 10 Jeffs in my band. Jeff's kind of one of those guys that always makes you feel comfortable and always make sure everything is taken care of, and just he's a great guy to have by your side and a great guy to have in your band. And then through him, I met Tim Harr. Tim is just phenomenal. If you guys ever do any kind of research on Tim, you know he was in the Army band for years, and guitar player and steel player and whatever else you want him to play, player. Just an amazing guy to be around. You got guys. Mitch Bland was always there, encouraging me when I first started singing. You know, he was one of the guys that was always like, "Hey man, singers gotta stick together," you know. So Mitch definitely helped me a lot along the way, just as far as encouragement. Because I was like coming from behind the kit to being a singer, and I didn't know how to make that transition really, you know. And Mitch helped me a lot about, hey man, just go get it, just whatever. And then Pete Ramsey, you know, I've always loved watching them play in Braille and multiple other bands, you know. I can't even think of all the bands that those guys have been in, but Pete was always so much fun, and he was always such a cool guy. I mean, you would go out and watch him, and and then after the show, he was the coolest guy. You know, Gary Horry was another one around that always looked up to on the drumming side of things. That always kept things. Gary was always the fun one to watch. You know, he's flipping sticks or kicking this or doing that. Man, who am I forgetting? I know we talked about Sherry and Jerry earlier. You know, Sherry Depew and Jerry Depew, and Joey and JL. Yeah, and like I know I'm forgetting a ton of people, but Nate and all those people that I've played with bands or with in bands over the years is just. Yeah, I mean Colt, you know, kind of got me back into things a little bit more when I first started back up. Colt was one of those like, hey, I think you really should do something a little bit more with these songs. So he was definitely one that probably pushed me to keep doing what I'm still doing, and did a great job on the first album. And then you come to people now that I play with now, like Caleb Atwood. He's a great buddy of mine, one of my best friends. He's one of those guys that writes all the sad country songs that I can't write that I wish I could, you know. But he can sit down and just knock them out. And his lyrics are just... That guy can write lyrics like no other. So, like Brian Carroll would probably be another one where, you know, I didn't know Brian for a long time. Like, you know, I would always go watch Jam Sandwich and I would talk to those guys. And I didn't really know Brian until one year we played this, he actually was playing, and it was kind of a thing like I did to Allison, where he said, hey, I need something to go eat, play me a song. And so he said, you know some country songs, play me a country song. And so he took a break, and we were at this like private St. Jude deal, and I played a couple songs. And then it started raining, and so I helped him tear down his gear, and we get back up into the garage. And I remember sitting down and talking. We were sitting on a cooler together, and everybody's just soaking wet, and we're trying to make sure that the gear's not soaking wet, you know. And I remember sitting down and kind of like finally formally introducing myself, and we sat there and talked, you know, for probably 45 minutes to an hour, and that was the first time I really had got to talk to Brian. I kind of knew who he was for years, but he's been another one too that has just really kind of encouraged me and said, hey, keep going. I think another big one would probably be Neil. You know, Neil Dennis. Neil played drums for us for the last few years until he moved to Florida. And Neil's always been a big inspiration to me. He's been one of those guys that could play drums, he could sing, he could play guitar, he could do whatever, and Neil was always encouraging me all the time to just keep going, man, just keep going. The times that I would want to give up, Neil would say, nope, you can't do that. You got to keep writing songs. You got to keep going. You know, what do you need? What can I help out with? What can I you know, we need this gear at this show. Like Neil was always that guy that was always there. So Neil was definitely another big one. We miss Neil. The other person we talked about earlier was Brian Larson. So Brian Larson, I was going to tell a story earlier. So the first like ever real show that you know my band ever played back in the day, in the rock band days, before, besides like playing in a garage to somebody, we were in a talent show at the Delavan Fall Festival. And I'm from Delavan, and Brian's originally from Delavan. And he was like on the board of the Fall Festival at that time or something. He was kind of in charge of the entertainment or whatever. And I remember we signed up, and he was like, "Man, I'm glad to see you guys signed up for this, you know, and this and that." And so I remember we talked to him, and we're like, "We don't have a PA. Like, we signed up for this. We don't have a PA. We thought there was going to be one there. There's not. Like, all the bands have to bring their own gear." And he said, "Oh, I got you covered. Come down to the house." And so I remember driving down to the house a couple hours before the show, and we loaded up some old JBL speakers that Brian had. And, you know, he basically loaned us a PA to play that show. And we went down there, we played this talent contest, and we had a great time. And that was a, like, kind of, I was probably 14 or 15 when that happened. So Brian was definitely another one that was a huge influence from the beginning, and always, you know, pushing the younger kids to play music. And I remember looking up to him, you know, at the time he was playing guitar for a bunch of different bands, or at the time, you know, or playing in a bunch of different bands anyway, and it was one of those where you just kind of looked up to that. You're like, wow, we could do that someday if we keep practicing in the basement or the garage, you know. So that was another cool story for sure. Yeah.
Do it right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom and Dad,
It's on you.
for letting me beat on the drums. This is no shit every day when I get back home from school. My deal with my mom was always, I had chores to do, right? So you come straight home from school and you do your chores, and then you could do whatever. And I would always cut deals with her. I'd be like, "Mom, just let me play drums for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes. Give me 20 minutes of playing drums, and I'll go work for 2 hours on whatever else you want. Just give me 20 minutes of uninterrupted drum playing." And she would be like, "Okay." And that was kind of like my deal. Like I would get home from school, and that was like that was my release, my, you know, my like kind of calm down from school and getting home period. As I come home and I play the drums for 20 minutes, and then I go out and do, you know, whatever I had to do. 10 more minutes, yeah. That always used to be my thing. She'd stomp her foot on the floor and say, "It's time to quit." And I'd say, 10 more minutes. And she'd say, "No!" Yep, but
Oh, cool, man.
and
Very
cut.
cool.